Well, George, obviously, his career was dedicated to preserving great natural landscapes in the Berkshires, but I think it goes far beyond that because George always had an emphasis, and it's something that we continue on, the whole context of the Berkshires and how land creates a sense of the Berkshires, but that the land is inextricable from artistic heritage, from cultural heritage, and that kind of attitude pervaded his work throughout his entire career and still does.
I think George provided the shoulders that the entire conservation movement in the Berkshires now stands upon. He was the point person in developing the Berkshire Natural Resources Council in the 1960s. In the 1960s, conservation was a fairly abstract concept.
But I came to the Berkshires at the request of the Miller family, Donald B. Miller, who was passionate about land preservation. And I had spent 2 years before I came here in the Hudson Valley when I was failing to, but trying very hard to get a land trust in the Hudson Valley. It was very meaningful to me at that time in life. It was a very original idea. And then somebody told me about Don Miller, and so he called me, invited me to the Berkshires, and we worked on the formation of the council.
The Berkshire Natural Resources Council, that sort of organization, was a brand new concept. People really weren't familiar with the idea of preserving open space by buying development rights or transferring development rights.
He came at a time when the environment was not a huge concern for a lot of people. It was just becoming an issue in the United States. And very much, in a lot of ways, he was ahead of his time in the county.
George fully fulfills the requirement of protecting our natural resources here in Berkshire County due to the incredible amount of land conservation that he achieved through his work with the Berkshire Natural Resources Council, establishing that really at the forefront of the land trust movement.
He was a real pioneer in that area, and at first it was kind of a shoestring operation, and then as the years went on, the concepts became more accepted, and he's just been able to do a tremendous amount in protecting open space land in the Berkshires.
The easiest accomplishment you can point to is the land that was conserved, right? Because there's a number associated with it. But I would say that his greatest accomplishment is the sort of the spirit he brought to the notion of environmentalism in the Berkshires, the sort of the happy warrior element, and the way in which the environmental movement in the Berkshires is not the elitist enterprise that it could be.
I've heard George described as the godfather of the environmental movement in Berkshire County. That seems a little heavy-handed, or the implications aren't so great. I prefer to think of George as the headwaters of the environmental movement. He has encouraged so many younger people to get involved in this work. He's helped foster and nurture ideas that have turned into full-blown organizations, and his spirit continues to inform so many of us who care about the Berkshires.
There are things that aren't here because of George, and unless you were here at the time, you wouldn't know that they were stopped. And he was fabulous at having an enemy and galvanizing the forces to stop something that he perceived as being a threat to the core of the habitat and the natural resources of the Berkshires.
The most important battles we fought was in 1972, in which we helped a citizen group in Monterey in an effort to put aside a proposal which would have done horrendous damage to the farmlands and woodlands of Monterey.
We prepared an environmental impact statement, and then we also posed the questions for the town of Monterey. What kind of future do you want for your community? I feel very positive about the fact that we were able to stop that road and continue to let Monterey be a vital part of the Berkshires.
If George had a passion besides the environment throughout his career, it was helping people who were trying to get into the business or advance ideas.
The council always had flocks of interns from Williams College or who would come in for the summer and work for us. These young people became very important to my life.
I worked with George as an intern in 1972, and that was my first exposure to land conservation, the real mechanics of it. And then a year later, we worked together to draft and then pass the Scenic Mountains Act in Massachusetts.
If we founded anything, I think what we founded was the idea of making sure that young people will go forward with what we have done.
I first came to know George as an intern right out of college. Working as an intern at the BNRC was my first job. And I had a fantastic opportunity there to learn what environmental conservation was all about. It was a field that I had only started to consider going into as a senior in college.
I was an intern 40 years ago, and he continued to have interns over the years, and those interns have gone off and led lives where we've done things that have to do with the environment or protecting our natural resources. He's created a legacy that is both the physical legacy of the land and a sort of abstract legacy of human beings, and I think both of those are vital.
I'd say that George's greatest accomplishments are really multifaceted. We could measure them in terms of the number of acres of land protected by the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. We could measure them by the number of interns that passed through the Berkshire Natural Resources Council and gained the skills that they needed to be effective environmental leaders. And we could look at the myriad environmental organizations in Berkshire County that were supported by the Berkshire Natural Resources Council in achieving their own missions.
George is completely deserving of receiving this award. He's been honored by many different groups over his long career, but I think the Berkshire Award is probably the most appropriate because it is the Berkshires that he loves above all, and so I'm very happy to be part of this celebration.